Hello my little pepper pots. I am drinking a beetroot and blackcurrant tea this morning, and so it actually looks like I'm just drinking a cup full of blood, which really appeals to my macabre side very much. It just looks so violent, it really does. I've actually realised how appropriate that is for what I'm going to talk about now. That was not intentional, I promise. Okay, so I've been inspired by Avalon, and to be fair, you know, who among us hasn't really at some point or another. I really love her This Witch's Perspective series. I think it's really cool. I think it's a really accessible way to bring up opinions about the craft and different aspects of the craft in a way which is less kind of like instructional and sterile and more kind of engaging and dynamic and alive. So I've decided to do a similar thing. I hope that's okay, Avalon. Just to discuss a few things that I've been meaning to get round to talking about with regard to witchcraft for a while, but I haven't really wanted to put forth an instructional perspective on it. I've just wanted to ramble about my own opinions, and it kind of struck me when I actually discovered that Avalon was doing this series that it's a really clever way of getting into this kind of thing without being overtly instructional, which is not really my flavour when it comes to witchcraft. I have watched a couple of videos about hexes and curses lately. One is the video from Avalon's This Witch's Perspective series, which I'll link for you below. Another one was done by Thorn Mooney from Drawing Canars. I'll also leave that below. I thought that this would be a good place for me to start because a little while ago in the comments section somebody asked me if I'd ever performed a hex or a curse. So I thought that would be kind of a good groove in the wood, a place to kind of begin my explorations of my opinions on certain aspects of the craft. I have never in my life performed a hex or a curse, which is really surprising considering that I was a very malcontented, very badass rebel teenager, as anybody who follows me on Instagram will know from the recent portrait that I posted of myself as a 17-year-old. So it's kind of surprising looking back at the memories that I have and at photos of myself at that age that I didn't utilise the power to hex and curse and all the rest of it. But something about it seemed really counterintuitive to me even at that young age, and it still does now. So even to this day I have never ever hexed or cursed anyone. So I suppose that might be surprising for some of you and not so surprising for others of you, I guess. I guess in a way it's surprising for me to kind of think of that, because when I was younger I had real problems with rage, I had a lot of problems with anger, and I certainly did have the capacity to commit violence, and I certainly had a lot of violent energy inside of me and all of that. That's absolutely it's non-negotiable, it's not up for debate. I was a very angry kid. I once kicked a hole through my door. You know, a girl tried to pick a fight with me on the playground and she lived to regret it. I was really angry. I'm the spawn of a very angry man and a woman who can get pretty damn feisty as well when she wants to. So, and two long lines of people who, you know, aren't shy of not backing down, put it that way. And I had a lot of pent up frustration, a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, a lot of pain inside of me, and it often came out as rage. It was a defensive mechanism, it was a self-protection thing. And so actually I suppose when you look at it in context it seems kind of confusing as to why I wouldn't take that into my circle. But all of that was kind of, you know, it wasn't so much premeditated. I'm still, even at this point in my life, not really one to back down if I feel that somebody needs to be defended, if I feel that you know, things are going to escalate if I don't step in a certain situation. I'm quite happy to do that. I've never been backwards in coming forwards, as my mother would say. But you know, it's not really premeditated malice and cruelty. It's more like, you know, I have very, very little flight and a hell of a lot of fight. And that's really how it is through quite a lot of the people on both sides of my family. If you look at my ancestral line on my father's side of the family in particular, you know, there's a lot of fight and not a hell of a lot of flight. But I don't think that really correlates with hexes and curses, which I feel are more premeditated and you know, they're more sort of thought through, if you will. I work largely on the energetic model in magic. If you don't know what that means, I will link below to a video that I made called Magical Models and Possibilities, which explains the 4 key models of magic and then the 5th model, the meta model. Check that out. It was filmed on my old camera, so it's, you know, it's kind of like it's been filmed on a potato. You're gonna have to probably put some headphones in to hear it decently, but it does explain kind of in depth what each of the 4 main models are. I work, you know, quite often in the energetic model, paradigm, area, space, part of the spectrum, whereby I consider magic to be about energy direction, energy conjuring, energy harnessing, and energy channeling, directing, moving from one place to another. That's the key model that I favour. I do think of the other models as just as true for different times and in different ways, but the energetic model is mostly what I think is going on. My psychology really kind of vibes well with that model, and I've seen the most evidence for the energetic model being the case. You know, the idea that you have a certain amount of control over energy, and you can feel your own energy, and you can feel other people's vibrations. And so if you have an awareness of it, then there must be this capability to harness it, or to amplify it, or to decrease it, or increase it, or, you know, play these little games with energy, and allow it to kind of flow where you want it to go. So because I work with that model, I am very much aware that if I was to hex or curse somebody, I would be exceedingly effective at doing so, because I feel that anger holds a very intense vibration, and I feel like, you know, for me, cursing somebody or hexing somebody would be a lot to do with harnessing and bottling that energetic vibration of anger, and then directing it outwards to somewhere, to where I wanted it to go. And I feel like because I'm so connected to the vibrational frequency of anger, and because I spent so much of my life angry, and because I'm quite quick to anger in a lot of situations, and have meditated that tendency out of me, you know, quite a lot over the last 15 years, I feel like cursing would definitely be my forte. And that kind of leads me on to one of the key reasons why I don't do it. Because I work with the energetic model most often, more often than not, that kind of leads me into an interesting territory that I often dance in, whereby I feel that energy is a finite resource, as in every day I get a certain amount of energy, and it's up to me how I spend it. I feel like energy expenditure is to do with waste and investment. So if you look, for example, at the way you manage your time, and you have a look at where you feel time was wasted during the day, i.e. scrolling Facebook and hitting like refresh and scrolling Facebook, versus where you feel time was invested, i.e. studying or spending time with your children or your partner or someone, people that you care about. So for me, you know, there's kind of a spectrum. It's not like you have to put energy in one box or another, but in general I feel like energy can either be invested, so you can get a return on that investment, or it can be wasted, meaning you've spunked it up the wall, it's gone forever. And for me, I feel like if I was going to put that much energy into directing ill intention towards somebody else, then I have to think about the other possibilities for that energy. I have to think about other things that I could do with it, other places I could direct it to. And actually, I feel like there's a lot more obvious and kind of effective ways to harness and direct that energy than in sending somebody, you know, ill intention, or wishing misfortune on somebody, or otherwise harming somebody, or making somebody feel the pain that they've inflicted on me or my loved one. I personally feel that that energy can be taken and harnessed and channeled and used in a much more productive, much more obviously beneficial way for me or my loved one who's been harmed or wronged. And so it's never really made sense. And for me, magic is about what makes sense and what works. And sometimes the magic that I do will be intensely over the top and theatrical and, you know, ridiculous and ceremonial, because that's what I feel is going to work in that situation. Other times it will be incredibly stripped down, incredibly basic, almost rudimentary in a way, because I feel like that's what's required for that situation. And I also dance, you know, in the spectrum of belief according to what's required for a situation. I have to think about what works and what's best. And for me, I don't feel like directing energy towards cursing somebody is as effective as directing energy towards healing myself or the loved one that's been harmed, putting up that barrier of protection, and all of that kind of thing. Like, that kind of stuff seems more sensible to me. It seems like an investment on my energy rather than a waste of my energy. I think one of the key issues with this whole discussion is vengeance versus self-defense in a way. For me, anything that happens after the fact, any kind of ill intention or bad energy or malevolence that I send to somebody after they've wronged me is about vengeance. And to me, I've always felt that vengeance is a life well lived. Like, the best vengeance is a life well lived. And so if I'm thinking in terms of the energetic model, and I'm thinking in terms of an incredible amount of energy which is stored up within me, which is my anger, my hurt, my pain, my desire to lash out, then I can think about kind of alchemically transmuting that energy into something much tastier, something much more beneficial, and I will extract my vengeance from the situation through having a life well lived, through making my life better, through healing and expanding and elevating and moving, you know, beyond, getting something for myself. And feeling like I have learned as a result of the experience, and not only that, I have grown, I have evolved, I have kind of taken joy from the experience, I have absorbed the lesson and become a better person for it, and am more able to enjoy life because of it. That to me is true vengeance. That's the kind of vengeance that I'm interested in, you know. I'm not really interested in lowering myself to the level, this is how I see it, lowering myself to the level that somebody else lowered themselves to in order to kind of direct any ill intention towards me. That's kind of a way of seeing it, I suppose, a way that you could choose to see it. And I often feel that way. I often think, well, you know, if I'm really pissed off with this person for doing something to harm me, then does it make sense to, you know, to send that same energy to them and conduct myself from that same level in response? Does it really make sense, or does it not make so much sense when I actually look at it and examine it? I really think if I can hex, then I can heal and protect. It's exactly the same kind of energy that's required. Like Avalon said that she feels that to put a curse on somebody, you need to have a lot of like really intense energy. It takes a lot to do it. It takes a lot out of you to do it. And I would agree, you know, and I do think that there is a distinct difference between hexing and cursing. I think cursing is next level, and it probably does take, like it does take a lot of energy to do it. If you're working in the mindset of the energetic model, whereby you do think that magic is about transferring energy in accordance with will and making change in accordance with will through how you choose to shift and redirect the energy, then it makes perfect sense that a curse would require a great deal of intense, balled up, kind of tightly wound and fiercely directed energy, which is going to take a lot out of you, which is going to be exhausting, which is going to require a lot of mental, physical, emotional and spiritual preparation. For me, I don't personally see that there's a lot of payback on my investment with that energy from a curse, whereas I do feel that there is an obscene amount of good payback, an obscene amount of benefit to taking that energy and directing it into healing and forgiving and releasing and surrendering and bringing joy into my life and letting the lesson flow over me so that I can have more and have better and have happiness and have comprehension of what's actually occurred so that I can move beyond it. Like, to me, that just seems like a much better return on my investment, and that's a personal viewpoint, and it might not kind of you know, it might not cut the mustard for a lot of other people, and that's absolutely fine. I don't mind that at all. But for me personally, it's about expenditure of energy, and that expenditure is kind of more in alignment with investment or more in alignment with waste. And all I'm interested in is whether or not I'm going to get enough return on my investment to actually do the working. When I think about the people who have harmed me in my life, either physically or emotionally, the people who've shit-talked me, the people who've manipulated me or lied to me, the people who abandoned me in my hour of need, you know, when I look at the people who have abused my loved ones in any number of ways, I think to myself that they must have been in a place of pain to be able to do that, and they must have been suffering to do that. And this is why I quite often feel like I fall more into the New Age way of things than I do into the pagan witch kind of way of things. Because to me it just makes a lot more sense to see that if somebody is willing to treat me in the way that some people throughout my life have treated me, then they've already hexed themselves. I don't need to do any work. They're already in purgatory. They're already miserable. You have to be miserable to behave the way some people have behaved who've harmed me. I see them and I look at them now, and I see them kind of, you know, through the mists of time, and I think about those things that they inflicted on me, and I feel pity. I feel pity. I don't need to curse them. I don't need to hex them. They are hexing themselves on the fucking daily if that is how they think it's okay to treat people. Those kinds of behaviours only come from a place of pain. Any infliction of pain is due to an infliction of pain, you know? Pain comes from pain. That's how it is. So I kind of feel like, why would I want to be another link in that chain? For me, I think there's a difference between self-defensive magic and magic for vengeance, and I just don't feel... I feel it's kind of obvious that cursing and hexing actually can't be self-defensive because it's done after the fact and it's done to exact vengeance. Bindings for me are a different thing. Bindings are a form of self-defense, magical self-defense. Again, this is my perspective, and this is not meant to instruct but only to inform you of my own opinion on the subject. both Thorn and Avalon touched on the love and light, you know, fluffy unicorns stereotype in magic and witchcraft. You know, in both of their videos they touched on that idea that there are people out there who, you know, like Thorn said, there are people all over the internet saying, well, if you hex or curse people, you're not a real witch. That isn't in the spirit of what being a witch is all about. And then Avalon said in her video, you know, there's this fluffy unicorns stereotype, which just isn't the case. And, you know, it reigns supreme in some circles and in some communities, this idea of a witch as love and light and tree hugging and tie-dye clad and all the rest of it. But actually even those witches have a spectrum within them, and, you know, even those witches have their own particular kind of moral setups and ethical setups and whatnot. And actually what you see on the surface isn't always what's underneath anyway. I think it's really important to avoid judgment and to avoid dogma wherever possible when it comes to the crafts. That's how I like it. That's how I like my craft served. I don't know about anyone else, but I prefer to do things without judgment. When it comes to cursing and hexing, I'm not a moral absolutist. I'm really into moral relativism. So I don't have this belief that something is absolutely wrong in every circumstance, no matter what the nuanced complexity of the situation, no matter who it is that's performing the hex or curse in this case. You know, I'm a moral relativist. I'm about, like, culture, and I'm about circumstance, and I'm about looking at the extenuating circumstances, and I'm about looking at where something lies in the terrain of reality, rather than kind of picking it out and saying this absolutely means that you're wrong, or this absolutely means that you're bad. I just don't get that, and it's not my bag, and I have a really you know, I have a really difficult time giving a lot of time to people who are into moral absolutism, because I think it just disregards so much of the nuanced complexity and so much of the detail that I need in order to be able to make any decision whatsoever about anything. So yeah, I don't think that if you hex or curse you're not a real witch, and I don't think that if you hex or curse you're a bad person. You know, I'm into moral relativism. I'm into everything is its own situation, everything is unique to its own circumstances. You know, like, everything is paradoxical, everything has its own little life, it exists in its own biosphere of moral complexity. And so I don't think of, if somebody said they hexed or cursed somebody, at best I would think, if they told me about the hexing or cursing and they said, like, I was really, really angry and I directed all this bullshit towards someone, and someone has said that to me, a friend has said that to me before, that she cursed somebody, and, you know, the only thing that I thought was that I wouldn't do it that way, because I would see it as a waste of some really mighty, fine, tasty fucking energy that I could have really done something a lot more productive with after I'd gotten over the hurdle of wanting to exact vengeance. That is a human thing. The desire to lash out, the desire to right a wrong, either in a social justice kind of crusader way or in a malicious you fucked me over, I'm gonna fuck you over twice as hard kind of way. These are human impulses, okay? We're not meant to whitewash them from our psyche. That's not the point. But I think the point for me is to decide what's best for me with magical working, what's going to be tastiest, what's going to give me the most return on that energetic investment. That's what it comes back to for me. And so really my thought probably would have been, when she told me that I wouldn't have done it that way, because it sounded like she had some really tasty energy there, and I would probably have thought that she could have done something a lot more useful with it. But that's just from my own perspective, and again, like, moral relativism all the way, and there would be no judgment. I do not think of witches as people that don't curse or hex, and I don't think that there's, like, black magic and white magic and that kind of thing. I use the terms dark and light, but in more of a Jungian way, not to mean, like, bad and good. I think those two things have been mixed up, which is really unfortunate, because I think dark and light are really good adjectives for a lot of the things that I like to approach and dance with in magic and witchcraft. So the fact that they have been kind of equated with bad and good is really unfortunate for me. But yeah, I don't believe in, like, black magic. I mean, I don't believe in the way that term is used. I don't believe in that particular definition. I don't think we need a definition for it. I think it's way more nuanced and complex than that. And the way that the term black magic is used, it was invented by moral absolutists for moral absolutists. And as I said, I'm not into moral absolutism, so I don't dig it. It's not my bag, baby. I'm personally really into things like forgiveness, acceptance, surrender, flow, absorbing the lesson, you know, and, like, all of that new age crap It's absolutely true that I am unapologetically and unabashedly a New Age witch, like far more than I am a pagan eclectic witch, I guess, in a way. I mean, I know there's some overlap, but I think a lot of people are very clear on where that line is, and for me, I am like way over the line. I'm over the line, I'm somewhere right over there, arranging a crystal grid so that it unlocks and activates all of my chakras so that I can go over the divide of the rainbow bridge and hook up with my inner child. Like, I am really, really like in the New Age side of things when it comes to my own particular craft, and I've often questioned whether or not I can curse somebody and forgive them at the same time, or whether or not I can curse somebody and later on find that I have no roadblocks to forgiveness in my psyche. And I actually don't think that those two things would coincide very well for me. I don't think that I could curse or hex somebody and then later on down the line allow myself to surrender and flow into forgiveness and actually release what's occurred and send love to that person. Now, for a lot of people, that isn't important, and for a lot of people, you know, they might wonder, why the fuck would you want to do that to somebody who's hurt you? But to me, it's important, it's part of the process. The process for me is to come back to unity, to recognise the spark of divinity within everybody. And so for me, I just don't think cursing and hexing actually gels that well with my bigger picture agenda, which is to forgive and to surrender to the release of forgiveness and to come back to the heart centre and allow it to be big and full and luscious and overflowing like the Ace of Cups. That to me is the bigger picture agenda, and cursing and hexing doesn't really dance with that too well, I don't think. You could choose to see cursing and hexing as self-transformative psychodrama rather than being something that is actually going to be directed towards your attacker or abuser or, you know, whoever, and result in something nasty. You could see it like that, but I always think there's a danger with you kind of deciding that that's how you want to package it up and that's how the universe is going to deliver it to you. But actually, when you perform a curse or a hex, you are directing energy towards at least some kind of symbol of that person who's wronged you. And that could go very wrong very quickly if you don't actually want harm to come to them. So, you know, I think in a way there are lots of other ways to perform a self-transformative psychodrama kind of spell, whereby you're actually just trying to free up your psyche to release the anger that's within you, and, you know, rather than actually maybe playing with sympathetic magic and kind of making a puppet of the person that's wronged you and putting all of the negativity into that, there are other ways to do it. You know, like I quite often sit in sacred space to do release work and shadow work, and I actually bring ritual into it and magic into it, and that to me is a way is a way more beneficial context in which to release anger and to get over stuff, rather than to actually direct really malicious intention towards the person who's wronged me. Because even though I feel I've got a handle on my magic at this point, and I know that I've got it wrapped up tight and there really isn't a lot of room for error, I've been practicing for a long time and I feel that I know what I'm doing, there is always a danger with stuff like that, that I'm going to direct something really malicious that's actually going to manifest in somebody's life, and I really don't want that to happen. So there are other ways to bring this self-transformative, self-development, psychodrama aspect of things into the equation without actually performing a curse or a hex. It hasn't actually failed to grab my attention that there's a certain amount of irony in the fact that when people talk about curses and hexes, they talk about how there is no right or wrong and how everything is dependent upon the situation, and how hexes and curses can be justified because of that complexity of circumstance, and how, you know, there's no way that you can judge cursing as an outright negative thing to do because it depends on the circumstance. And yet it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because when you curse or hex somebody, you are judging what they've done to you as absolutely wrong. And so you're coming from the perspective of a moral absolutist, whilst at the same time being kind of preaching moral relativism. So you're using moral relativism to somehow explain why you're going to curse or hex somebody, but then cursing or hexing somebody in a way is a testament to the fact that somewhere within you are a moral absolutist, and so that irony isn't lost on me, but I kind of play with that. I play with that idea on and off, and that's the kind of thing that's so interesting about magic and witchcraft, right? It's like it opens you up to so many. You just go down so many avenues. There's so many portals. There's so many wormholes. It's never ending. And I do think that's an irony that isn't lost on me. But again, it's not about judgment at all. And I would never say that there won't be a point in my life where I won't curse somebody or hex somebody, because I honestly don't know, and it's not something that I would rule out. I see shards of me in everyone that I come across. And even if I feel like I can't relate to why somebody's doing something, which, by the way, with cursing and hexing, I can totally relate to it. Like, I have been that angry. It's just a simple case of, like, vengeance to me doesn't work that way. Like, revenge is not sweet unless it's revenge that makes me feel better, and that kind of vengeance doesn't make me feel better. It doesn't align with my spiritual perspective, which is oneness, unity, and living from the heart chakra. It just doesn't, so it doesn't do it for me. But it's not like I can't relate to it. But even with things that people do in magic and witchcraft that I point blank, hands down, can't relate to, I don't think of it as other to me. I always think there may be a circumstance at some time in the future that hasn't happened yet that would lead me to do something that right now I can't imagine myself doing. So it's never about judgment. It's always about the fact that, you know, magic is a parallax. It's different depending on how you're looking at it. Like your hand, there we go, parallax situation. Lots of people talk about using curses and hexes to right a wrong, and I can see that perspective, definitely. I can see that it's the idea of balance, right? It's the idea of the scales, and it's the idea of tipping the scales in the other direction, bringing karmic return or bringing karmic equality to something through the medium of magic. I can understand that. It's not my particular preference, and it's not my particular flavour. I often feel like, you know, if somebody attacks me or someone that I love, if somebody wrongs me or someone that I love, is cursing or hexing them, is harming them in some way, actually the most effective way to right the wrong that has been done? You know, if indeed there is such a concept as kind of like, you know, the karmic scales or the scales of justice, which in a way I think is a really comfortable and neat little thing that we've like boiled it down to as human beings, but it's something that I can definitely relate to. It is an archetype that runs through human experience, the idea of the scales of justice and the idea of balance needing to be restored, and the idea of duality, which is the biggest fucking archetype of all, really. Like, everything is duality, and because we have two halves of the brain, I think, is part of it. And we come from like two chromosomes, and like, you know, the combination of chromosomes, and we come from two parents, and, you know, duality, always duality and polarity, and kind of like the interplay of opposites. So I can understand why the scales of justice thing factors into people's reasoning for cursing and hexing. But to me, I just feel like, okay, I do get that somewhere along the line balance needs to be restored, but is it restored through me doing harm to that person, or is that a really literal way of looking at it? In fact, I like to think of the restoration process as a return to the joy that was there before the pain. That, to me, is the restoration process that I favour. So, for example, if somebody did something really heinous to my loved one, and I had a hell of a lot of energy that I wanted to, like, shoot out at their attacker, I would say, hey, do you know what? That is a hell of a lot of energy that I can invest into helping my friend who has been harmed to heal, and to release, and to feel joy again, you know, to actually patch up that wound and get the heart chakra spinning again. To me, that is just as much of a restoration, that's just as much of a balance of the scales, that's just as much of a return back to the former order. It's just done in a different way, and it's a way that kind of complements my psyche. And so those are my thoughts, and maybe this is a bit of a different perspective than some of the things that you've heard before, or maybe not, maybe it gels with your perspective. Let me know below. And I just want to end this video by saying these are my opinions, and as with all of the videos on my channel, they're my opinions. And when I make videos for you guys where I'm like going on walks and just kind of riffing and giving it to you raw and real and speaking from the heart, it's not as if I think that what I'm saying is a one-size-fits-all answer to every single person's problems, and it's not as if I'm speaking directly to you and saying, look, you need to do this, or, you know, you're not going to feel joyful again, or you're not going to get what you want out of life. I'm speaking from my personal experiences as a spiritual counsellor and my personal experiences as a human being. If my opinions don't vibe with you, you do not have to take them on. You're not obligated to take them on. And if something that I say doesn't sit right with you or isn't correct for your particular situation, that's fine. And I would never want you to feel like you had to take that on. If something I say just doesn't float your boat or flick your switch, move on to something else. I just want to put that out there. I feel like, you know, sometimes I might say something that doesn't vibe with you and that actually feels very, like it might grate on you like sandpaper or something. And it's okay to acknowledge that, and it's okay to recognise that I'm just speaking about things from the lens of my consciousness, and you're speaking about things and thinking about things through the lens of yours. And my advice might not always be your particular flavour, and that's okay. It's okay to recognise that, and it's okay to go with that. Okay, so these were my thoughts on curses and hexes, and I'll be back with another ramble at some point soon about some witchcraft topic or another. I haven't really decided which one yet, but yeah, I'll be back. Much love, blessed be.